Hi there, Vasco here, your host. I wanted to share a story with you. You know how sometimes Agile just feels like following another checklist? When processes and frameworks feel more important than what we are trying to achieve, and sometimes even like handcuffs. I was talking to a customer of the Global Agile Summit, and he used a term that I kind of stuck in my mind. He said, "I have agile fatigue." And I've heard that a lot from people since then. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. So we started thinking, and at the Global Agile Summit, which is happening this May, we're bringing together practitioners who've actually done that, who've broken free from this, install the framework kind of mindset. We want to focus the summit on real-life, first-person stories of Agile succeeding that inspire you to action. We're talking real experiences, practical solutions, and of course, amazing insights from leaders like Gojko Adzic, who will be one of the keynote speakers, and Jürgen Apelo, who will be one of the keynote speakers as well. If you're ready to leave the Agile fatigue behind, just join us in Tallinn. The early bird tickets are now available at the globalagilesummit.com. And mark your calendars. We will have workshops on May 18th. That's a Sunday. And then the conference itself will happen on May 19th and 20th of 2025 in Tallinn, Estonia. So let's make Agile exciting again. And remember, go to globalagilesummit.com, that is, and get your early bird ticket now. It will only be available until early March, so grab it now. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday. This week, we have with us Susan Hughes. Hey,
Hello.
Susan. Welcome back.
Happy to be back. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Susan, on Tuesday, of course, it's Team Tuesday. We talk about teams. But before we dive into that, what was the book that most inspired you in your role as a Scrum Master?
Okay, this answer, it's going to feel a bit like a cop-out, but I have very strong feelings about this. And that is the Scrum Guide. And that is my true, authentic, honest answer. And here is why I feel so deeply about this. Scrum Masters are the people who are accountable for coaching Scrum, and yet not enough of us go into this guide for Scrum to reread it, understand it, and most of all, keep up with the updates that are happening. I have talked to so many Scrum Masters out in the world about what are your team's product goals, for example? And they'll look at me and go, product goals? I mean, we have sprint goals, but we don't have and sorry, this has been happening a little bit. When I say sprint goals, it sounds like sprinkles, which I find hilarious. A little bit of an aside.
Because it can sprinkle motivation and focus into the team.
Onto that and collaboration. So yeah, they know what a sprint goal is, but a product goal, or there are people who say, yeah, we're out there, we're doing Agile, we're grooming the backlogs. And this one is a point of contention for me because I feel very deeply about inclusivity and inclusive language. And the Scrum Guide, Agile Alliance, made a very stated, documented point of removing the word grooming from the vocabulary of Agile because it was making people uncomfortable. And they started using refining to have more inclusive language. And this is just Susan's list of complaints podcast, but please, if you're listening, don't do these things. Don't have a daily Scrum where it is just, yesterday I did this, today I will do this, tomorrow, I am blocked on. That's my trying to be a robot voice. If you look in the Scrum Guide, it's not, those three questions aren't in there anymore. And it makes it very clear that a daily scrum is for the developers, by the developers, to come up with a plan and discuss progress towards the sprint goal. Sprint goal. I feel so strongly that we are the teachers and coaches of Scrum. There is this free guide on the internet that tells you exactly what to do with it. And if you, as a Scrum Master, aren't in there understanding the foundations of Scrum, the processes, the intent of Scrum, I do not think you should be a Scrum Master. And I'm whispering that because I'm very scared to say it, but I feel that way. Like that is your basic job.
There's one coming back to that point that you made. There's one reason to support the use and the attribution of certificates, and that is to certify that people know the basics. Now,
Yes.
many certificates are not given on that premise, so maybe they can be improved. But there is an argument to say that, okay, so there's this minimum set of things that people need to know. And if you're coaching the use of Scrum, whether you're a leader, a Scrum Master, an Agile coach, or just a team member or a product owner, then of course you need to know the rules of the game. And I remember many years ago, there was this, I guess we could call it humoristic blog post called Scrum Butt. That kind of tried to illustrate what is not Scrum, right? Like anything that requires a but is not Scrum, right? Now, that doesn't mean that everybody should use Scrum. Obviously not.
Yes.
People are free to use other methods and practices. But I think that your point about Scrum Masters needing to know the basics about the Scrum Guide, I think that's a very important one. And maybe something we should do something about here on the podcast, maybe create a free e-course about the Scrum Guide.
I love
that. Maybe we need to talk about that, Season.
And I'm not saying that we need to go in and do Scrum, if that's even a thing, practice the processes of Scrum to the letter of the Scrum Guide. But I do think at a minimum, you should know what they are and why they are there before you start doing any form of Scrum. But yes.
Yeah, and Scrum is a sufficiently deep and complex set of patterns that it is unreasonable to expect people to know why they are there before they read the guide first and then practice it for a while.
Exactly. Know what it is so you can coach it and then be able to, it's like riding a bike. You know that basic mechanism of the bike, but maybe you're going to take it down some different paths or decorate your bike or do some wheelies, but at least you know how to ride that bike and you could teach someone how to do it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. That was the Scrum Guide episode, everybody. All right. Next, we need to talk about teams, right? Because Scrum is there to support teams' success, but sometimes teams create their own set of problems. Today is Team Tuesday here, and we always talk about teams that somehow go down the self-destruction path. How far they go on that path depends a lot on us and their leaders, obviously. But let's explore that story there, Season. Tell us a little bit the context. So, how big the team was, what kind of project they were working on, and then what happened? Like, what were those behaviors or patterns that developed over time and became a problem for the team?
Yep. So the biggest thing I see here on Team Tuesday is we are calling a group of people a team who are not actually a team. And it was hard for me to come up with a specific story because I've seen this in every organization I have ever worked for. What's happening is we are using this word team very loosely, and we often have what is actually a work group or a working group. And what a work group looks like is you have a bunch of people who are working on their own independently with their own work and their own individual goals, and they're being rewarded to do that particular piece of work. You can tell you're on a work group because if you're forced to go to a daily scrum as a work group, you're seeing everybody give their different updates about the work that they're doing. And it's just status updates. Like you don't care what the other people are working on. You have no incentive to care about it. You can tell you're in a work group because if you try to come up with a sprint goal, it's almost impossible because you have no reason to work together as an actual team. And what happens in these situations when you're in a coaching role or you are a Scrum Master is you have two main paths ahead of you. And one is where you can try to bring people together as a team. So I am working on what we would refer to as a team, but what is actually a work group of about 12 people right now. And I am trying to take that path with them. They have different specialties in the areas that they work in. So some specialize in Android development, some are on iOS development, some of them are on web development, and they're all working on different projects with different kind of product owners. They all have their own individual goals, and I've been challenging them to come up with a sprint goal that actually brings them together as a team that they can work towards. So that's
and
one.
they are they originally a work group when you put that challenge to them?
Yes. Yeah. I would very much describe this team as a work group. They are an amazing group of people and they're all individually doing interesting work. And I'm just wondering, can we bring them together as a team first through this mechanism of a sprint goal? When we come into sprint planning, does it look like, okay, this person has their work and they're full, and this person has their work and they're full, and this person has their work and they're full? That's what sprint planning looks like right now. I'm trying to use the word our, OUR at sprint planning intentionally to move from my work to what is it that we can do together as a team, and moving from I'm going to get my portion of the work done to what needs to happen from start to finish for us to be done with the work. At sprint planning. Sorry, were you going to say something, Vasco?
No, I was going to ask, like, when you see those, I mean, when you're practicing those things that you just shared with me, how does it land?
Confusion every time. I mean, I'm describing this particular team, but this plays out in the same way every single time. It feels like this, and I'm not saying that one work group versus team, one is better or worse than the other. They're just two different circumstances. And being a team certainly lends itself better to the processes and foundations and mentalities of Scrum because it requires that collaboration and working together. So if you are forcing these Scrum events on a team that is not a team and has no incentive to do this highly collaborative way of working, like you're killing this group of people here. And what I see is confusion about, why are we here? Why are we planning this sprint? Why do I have to hear about this work that doesn't relate to me? We have too many meetings. That's a big thing that happens when you're a work group and you're making them do all these daily scrums and retros. Like the other path here is to just stop. Like stop forcing Scrum onto a group of people that works better more independently. Explore something like Kanban, which really lends itself well to a work group of people where you're limiting your work in progress, where you are taking first in, first out. There's a whole different set of metrics around that too. But this is what I see the most in the field is calling something a team and forcing Scrum onto a group of people that Scrum is not the best fit for them. Like I'm saying it here, Scrum is not the best fit for every organization, and that is fine.
Well, one of the kind of questions, puzzles in those situations is, of course, why are these people somehow gathered as a group? And I mean, there could be very good reasons, right? Like it doesn't need to be an accident. It can be on purpose. Like, for example, they all report to the same technical manager. That's a very common, we could call it convenience reason to aggregate people within a work group.
Yes.
But of course, one of the things that you said, Scrum may not be the right approach for them. I think it's very important for us to recognize that, also because it diverts from other work that we need to do. So, for example, in this example that I shared, where people are aggregated around a technical manager rather than working as a team, then maybe we need to work with that manager first and understand their goals and see if there's an opportunity to help them reach their goals. Because if there isn't, right, like if everything is great as it is, then maybe we should move on to another team, right?
Exactly.
And the other thing that is really puzzling is, and you've said it, right? Like we've all heard this, there are too many meetings.
Yes.
Right? And what is puzzling is, okay, so we feel there are too many meetings, but we still keep coming into these meetings. And I don't mean like the team members are coming. I mean, they are being asked to come to those meetings.
Yes.
Right? And then we have to ask, but what is the reason for us to have these meetings? And coming back to this example that you said, like, can we come up with a sprint goal that is shared by all of us? One of the kind of, I have two rules to use Scrum. And one of the rules is that there's one team, right? Everybody's wearing the same jersey. There's no random colored jerseys in the team. I know who to pass the ball to. I know who will pass the ball to me. And then one goal, right? And I very often use the metaphor of a basketball game where imagine that you go into a basketball game and everybody's wearing a random jersey, but there are 4 other people on your team. You just don't know who they are. Then the baskets were somehow moved, so they're no longer there. There's no point in trying to, shoot a basket because they aren't there, and you can't count points anymore because there's no basket to go through. Like, and then you start to say, okay, but then there are no conditions to play basketball.
So why are we trying to play basketball? Let's do something else that's better for the team and provides more value to our customers. Yes.
Yeah. So it is really, I think, for us as Scrum Masters especially, it is a very trying position to be in, to recognize that, hey, I'm actually hired to do a job that can't be done and shouldn't be done in this particular work group.
Yes. And I think I have a very strong feeling that on another day of this podcast, we're going to get into why that happens. So stay tuned, listeners.
Yeah, no spoilers. No spoilers.
The little leadership. That's what we'll talk about later.
Yeah, but that is definitely one of the critical anti-patterns, and it's not just Scrum. I heard the same anti-pattern back when I was a project manager.
Exactly.
And we had to, quote unquote, coordinate people who were not working on the same things.
Exactly. So if there's no coordination available in the work, it's why the question of why are we here? And at the end of the day, why we are here is to coach high-performing team, or the reason I come to work is I want to coach high-performing teams, which means to me people that have what they need to get the job done and are supported and are working in ways that provide the most value to the customer and to the people doing the work. And sometimes we are just prevented from doing that in different ways.
And it's okay to then recognize it and move on, or suggest other ways like Kanban.
Yeah. And the response that you will get from the people that you bring that up to can be very telling about the organization.
Well, that's another episode. Stay tuned.
Exactly.
It's coming up. Susan, thank you very much for sharing that story with us.
Thank you. I'm glad that we got to discuss something that's very true to my heart here. Thank you.
We really hope you liked our show.
And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.